Hi guys, it's now week 9 of my 100 Days of Making Comics challenge. Okay, so a little bit of a warning beforehand. I'm not sure how, articulate this point is going to be. It's just sort of an observation that I've noticed, and for anyone actually in this position currently, I don't mean to be offensive or anything. I'm just trying to save people a little bit of grief. So as the title says, I kind of don't think having OCs alone is enough to make or sustain a comic properly, which is kind of maybe backwards to what I've said about Princesitting so far, because it was just I made OCs and then I decided to do something with them. But what I'm talking about is I feel like I see a lot of people saying that they want to make a comic with their OCs that they've had maybe a long time, or OCs that they've developed and then they've developed the story for, but they haven't gone straight into making a comic. Like, I think that's what sort of saved Princesitting a bit. But yeah, I see a lot of people who want, or at least say that they want to make a comic with their OCs, but then don't get around to actually making the comic. I've been surprised by how many artists' characters I've seen, they do this, and I've seen them talk a ton about it, but maybe it's been like literally years and no comic has been produced, or whichever project they've planned for those characters. It doesn't necessarily have to be a comic, but it could be a visual novel, it could be a type of game, something, anything. But just for this talk alone, I'll be focusing on comics because this is a 100 Days of Making Comics video series, of course. And I think this thing, it could be a couple of different things. One, that, of course, I do think there is the fear of getting started element. That's probably a big one. I have a video in this series, I think it's my week 3 video, that's basically a pep talk for anyone facing that currently. Like, starting a comic is scary, I understand that. I think there's also the huge time investment that a lot of people think it is, and that it is. I think a lot of people also overthink both their story and all the planning you might have to do to make a comic. Or maybe you think artistically you're not ready, which I wonder if that's the fear of making a comic creeping back into, but I also understand that there is a lot of times where people want to go for like a certain style and they're trying to get that style down first. Or like it really could be a time commitment issue and life's just getting in the way. I think that's very much a thing too. But I think even considering all of these things, some people just like to talk about making a comic instead of actually getting on with one. Or I think what's puzzled me even more is that they'll draw their comic characters a lot. And I mean, like, it's the majority of the art that they produce is the art of their OCs and the OCs that they want to then do something with. And, they get people invested in these characters and they talk about one day making a comic, but then they just don't do it, even though they seem to have the time and the drive to draw these characters over and over again. And I think if it's not anything external stopping you, like if it really isn't fear and it really isn't, lack of focus or anything like that, I think some people just really do enjoy talking about OCs and their story and drawing illustrations of them. I think that's totally fine and valid, and that you don't have to put all of the time into making a comic if you don't want to do that. And I think I've gained more of an appreciation for that as its own thing lately. And I just don't think you actually need to make a comic with your OCs, like having OCs by themselves is its own thing, and that's fine. I wonder if this is maybe turning into the opposite of my pep talk video from week 3, where I'm saying that maybe you don't need to act on the pressure to make a comic, but the pressure is only worth acting on if you really mean it and that you really want to give this a go, not just that you feel you need to mush your OCs into a proper, comic. But yeah, I used to think it was a problem of like focus or motivation or, decisiveness or something, but after my experiences specifically with Princesitting, I've changed my mind about that. I've made OCs in the past and had a general idea for the story, and then I've tried to put that into a comic, and it's just been super hard, and all I've really wanted to do with those characters is just to draw them, maybe over and over again, and that's it. And it took accidentally stumbling my way into a comic that actually worked as a comic this time around to teach me that. Ashton, Nico, and all of the other characters for the comic, they feel a little bit different to my Vocaloid designs or just my regular OCs in that, like, with the Princesitting cast as a whole, actually, I'm kind of struggling to think of illustrations for them or, like, situations where they could exist outside of the comic right now. And it's literally like all of my ideas and energy goes into the storytelling instead. It's kind of hard to explain. Like, sometimes the fun in drawing an illustration for me, whether it's, you know, personal stuff, fan art, or just, like, assets for Kira, is in actually making the character appear in front of me and getting to see them in my style, figuring out how to draw them, and, like, maybe capturing a certain mood and then making a cool image with all of that. Whereas with my characters for print sitting, I don't really care too much about making them look cool or, like, good. I just kind of want to show them doing stuff. And if I do get a picture of them in my head, my mind will sort of wander to what kind of story that would be good to tell with. And then I'll have an idea for a comic episode, and I'll just want to fit it into that instead, rather than like a single illustration. I think it's probably trickier to do illustrations with them as well, because I'm so used to having like a script on what they need to be doing. And then suddenly I don't have that when I'm trying to work on an illustration with them. Or at least not to the same, like, storytelling degree. I'm just focused on making the image look cool. I don't know exactly what was super special this time around either, because with print sitting, you know, as I've said, I did start out with OCs, and then I did sort of jump into it pretty quickly. I think maybe it was the non-committal approach, or just not letting it sit and develop separately. With my other stories, I had, like, a ton more of it planned, and I just wanted to get the story out there and told. And I think it took so long to get to that part, and that I had so much planning to do to bridge that gap. Whereas with print sitting, you know, right away I was into it, and I made one comic, and then I made another one, and then made another one. And, like, it does have a vague plot now, but I haven't worked it all out so much that now I'm just bored trying to get there. And it's weird because I don't really consider myself too much of an exploratory writer. I am more used to actually writing from an outline when I do projects like my visual novel, but specifically with comics, because it's just so much more effort to draw the thing completely out in story form versus just writing it, that it's much slower in creating the story and trying to get to that point, and I don't think my tolerance is quite there for getting through all of it. And I think that's probably true for a lot of artists and authors as well, that actually getting to the point with a comic, it's just so slow. Maybe it does need more of an exploratory approach. So I think if print sitting didn't have that discovery writing element to it, it wouldn't have even made it to the point it is now, and we're not even that far into it. But if I just had fun drawing Ash and Nico, making illustrations with them, I think that's super valid too, and I don't want anyone to think that that's not a valid option, and that's kind of the point of this rambly video. OCs can just exist to draw them and have fun with them, and that's the important part. And I think a lot of artists feel pressured to make something from them when illustrations alone really is just fine. I had a much older project where I think I tried to spin, you know, these illustration OCs into a few different things actually. I'll have them on screen, some of the illustrations that I did with them, and there's a couple of speed paints on this channel somewhere too. You know, I had fun bringing those images to life, and then I tried a visual novel with these characters, and then I tried an illustration storybook kind of thing, and honestly all that did was like kill my interest with these characters a little bit. Although, you know, every so often I do try just drawing them, and then, yeah, the fun comes back to it when they're just illustrations alone. And so I think you sort of need to assess if the medium you're expressing your ideas in is the right one, and if it's, you know, if it's just illustration, you know, I say as an illustrator, that's fine. So, yeah, those are my feelings, and I don't really have a good way to, like, spin this into something super useful. You know, maybe just affirming that it's fine for artists to just have characters that they want to draw. You know, even characters with a good, long, complicated story to them, but you're just not obliged to do something with that story. You can just have it, you can just explain it to people, and if that's what makes you happy, then just do that, you know? So that's all I have for this week. My comic, Print Sitting, is over on Webtoons, if anyone would be interested in checking that out who hasn't already. Next week, I want to talk about art block and sort of why I don't think it's real, but also what I think the term art block is made up of, because I think it's a bunch of different other things that people then use the term art block for. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you back next week with that video for week 10 of the challenge.